Hello YouTube and welcome back to our channel. On today's episode of Know Your Rights we are covering lawsuit settlements out of the city of Denver, Colorado. If this sounds interesting to you, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel. Now let's dive right into this new story out of Denver. The city of Denver has been ordered to pay $12 million in damages to 12 demonstrators over the Denver Police Department's response to the protest following the death of George Floyd in 2020. The 8-member panel ruled that practices and policies at the department's highest level prompted officers to use tear gas, pepper balls, and other weapons against nonviolent demonstrators. The Policar officers conduct infringed on the plaintiffs' First and Fourth Amendment rights in several situations. As far as I know, said Tim McDonald, a counsel for the plaintiffs, this was the first instance of George Floyd protesters injured by police to go to trial across the country. Hopefully, what police departments will take away from this is that these civil right violations were taken seriously by a jury of ordinary citizens. They're also ready to inform the police that what they did to peaceful protesters was unacceptable. The police left the plaintiffs physically and emotionally devastated, according to their testimony. Outside of the Alfred A. Araj United States Courthouse, the group cheered when the judgment was read. "When we say this can't happen again," one of the plaintiffs, Elizabeth Epps, explained, "we mean both what the police did to us and the underlying police brutality, which is why we had to come to the streets." During the demonstrations, police shot Epps with pepper balls as she crossed the street quietly. Plaintiffs' counsel referred to bad record-keeping, a failure to issue dispersal orders, and other blunders as catalysts for their clients' mistreatment throughout the 3-week federal trial. According to officers described in Denver Police Department documents used as evidence, the department suffered a complete leadership collapse throughout the demonstrations. In response to the verdict, the city issued a statement stating that it will continue to examine how law enforcement agencies respond to protests. Officers committed mistakes in several incidents, according to the statement. "We continue to examine our rules and training to ensure that we are implementing best practices identified by law enforcement across the country to better protect peaceful protesters while addressing those who are just there to engage in violence," according to the statement. Plaintiffs, the city's former independent monitor, and more than a dozen former and present Denver police officers, as well as other law enforcement professionals, were all called as witnesses. When officers used force against demonstrators, city attorneys maintained that they were acting in the best interests of public safety. Lindsey Jordan, the city's chief defense attorney, said the department had never seen anything like the 2020 protests in her final remarks on Friday. "It was like being ready for cold and flu season, and then COVID comes around," Jordan explained. "This was hardly a straightforward situation of primarily peaceful protesters being subjected to chemical weapons because a few bad actors were present. The George Floyd protests were anything but simple. Even yet, McDonald argued in his closing argument that Denver Police Department should have been able to discriminate between violent and nonviolent demonstrators when using tear gas, pepper balls, and other crowd control weapons. The police force was irrational, he claimed. "There was no reason to use force on any of our plaintiffs in a single incident, and our clients were injured physically and emotionally as a result." The defense is anticipated to file an appeal, which means the case might be heard by a higher federal court in the coming months. In addition to the monetary damages given to plaintiffs, District Judge R. Brooke Jackson could use injunctive relief to mandate specific policy changes inside the department. The city is anticipated to pay the majority of the plaintiffs $1 million each. One plaintiff will earn $3 million in damages after suffering a severe brain injury. Epps will also receive $250,000 in punitive damages for claims made against a single officer. According to Jason Williamson, executive director of NYU's Center on Race, Inequality, and the Law, which analyzes cases like the one in Denver, the verdict is likely to have weight in future civil rights actions resulting from the protests, including others in Denver. "I'm sure that litigators all throughout the country will use a win in this case as material for future fights," Williamson said. But, he added, "the decision has symbolic value. I believe people are now beginning to grapple with law enforcement as a notion in general, as well as the reality that we're having a dialogue about reinventing what it means to do law enforcement in this nation," Williamson said. "I believe this demonstrates that the protests have long-term consequences." A large number of litigants agreed. Stanford Smith, who left the protests in 2020 when cops pepper blasted him in the face, called it a success. However, "We are still a long way from a society where our black and brown neighbors are safe from police brutality," And everyone who is glad, excited, or hopeful in the wake of this verdict should channel that energy into ending police brutality in Denver and across the country. The settlement adds to the city's mounting bill for the police department's excessive use of force during the protests. Denver City Council unanimously accepted settlements with 2 protesters last month, avoiding the need for a trial. To date, Denver has spent more than $15 million on claims settlements. Well, YouTube, I hope you liked this video. If you would like to see more content like this video, please take a moment and subscribe to our channel. Until the next episode of Know Your Rights, stay safe out there.